Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Strength Students podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Scopoletti.
I'm your other co-host, Steve Carty.
And today, our guest from London, Ohio, Dave Tate, owner of EliteFTS. How you doing, Dave?
Great. Thank you for having me.
So we're very excited to have you on. Just quick background. I've read EliteFTS most of college, and I'll tell you right now, I was just at a wedding for my roommates this past weekend, and they always used to make fun of me. They'd be like, what would Nick be doing on a Friday, Saturday night? Like, oh, you're in your room reading ELIFs. And I was like, it's not ELIFs, it's EliteFTS.
ELIFs, that's great.
So I was an exercise science major as well. So I spent most undergrad on the training, you and Wendler's training blogs. And so this is really awesome having you on today. I'm glad you decided to do it. So that's first off.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. This is great.
So first off, just explain to everybody who you are if they don't know already.
A nobody. Let's put it that way. I've been involved in one way or another in the. It's hard to. What's the word I'm looking for? It's hard to describe the industry that we're all in. I have a hard time with that because I think everything falls back into what business are you really in, and that's different than saying I'm in the e-commerce business or I'm in the fitness business or the strength business. You know, what business you're really in really defines what you do. But I've been involved with training people in strength since I did my first powerlifting meet when I was 13, so we're going back to like 82, 83, right around there.
Damn.
I started training when I was 12. The 16-week meet cycle or whatever it was went over my birthday. So my first meet was when I was 13. But when I was in high school, I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible, but just to show some of the resume behind this. When I was in high school, I was labeled as everything you can be labeled as far as learning disability goes. So, and I was also lazy as fuck, which I didn't really realize until later, which is another story. And so I arranged my schedule so the first 3 periods of every day, my junior and senior year, were in the weight room. Now, the funny part about this is I didn't train there. I trained with powerlifters later at night. I just took attendance for the weight room, the coaches that were there. You know, maybe they left and went to McDonald's. I don't know. I'm not going to say either way. Or maybe they supervised. So I really kind of was at a really, really young age showing people how to lift. And all I really knew was powerlifting. Now, I was not showing them how to powerlift. I wasn't that stupid. You know, there wasn't enough time. The place was full of universal machines. It's just proper posture, how to use the machines. Don't be an idiot. Most of them didn't want to train anyhow. They're wearing their fucking jeans and school clothes. They don't even train. It's just it's an easy gym A or whatever it is.
Right.
But it was my exposure to actually helping 1 out of 15, 20 people in each class that actually gave a shit. And once I graduated, I worked as the strength coach, quasi strength coach, for volunteer for the football team for a couple of years, and kind of liked it, but kind of didn't, because when I played, everybody was serious about it. And I also didn't train with the team. I trained with the powerlifters at night who were 30, 35 years old. So I couldn't stand training with the team because they didn't take it as serious as what I took it. And I'm not saying I was a lunatic. I was a part lunatic, but I just don't get the fucking around, you know, and screwing around and doing the stupid shit and, you know, posing in the mirror. It didn't make sense to me. because that's not, you got to keep in mind, I was, a troubled 12-year-old getting in a lot of trouble with learning disabilities, thrown into a real powerlifting gym where people train for meets, and really nobody else trained in the place. So every session had a purpose. Everything you did had a purpose. And then every now and again, I'd have to train with the football team. And it's like, what the fuck? And I understood it. And now I know more why teams need to train together than I did back then. But my coaches, and to give them all credit, they were really cool about it because I was 10 times stronger than anybody else on the team. But they didn't mind me training someplace else. And I did have enough respect to show up on the days that they were training, to at least be there, to kind of help, verbal cues and so forth with those type of people. From there, I went to college and ended up being, I should have a PhD, but I have a bachelor's for the time I put into college. But
Same.
I switched majors, one class shy of graduating from a sociology degree, and then went into independent studies with focus on strength and conditioning and nutrition. And I avoided that, and I guess this is kind of a lesson for people getting into school today. It's a different landscape now, where there are professions in this sector to be able to make a living. When I was coming up, everybody from counselors, everybody was, you can't make money lifting weights. You can't make money helping other people lift weights. There's no career path. And it wasn't. I mean, unless you were going to be a fitness instructor at a health club making nothing, which I did that.
Feel ya.
Or you were going to be, the coordinator of a corporate health program, which were far and few, or you were going to manage a commercial gym, a big, large-scale commercial gym, which was all sales, so I just kind of said, fuck it, after realizing that I didn't really know what I could do with a sociology degree outside of being a census taker. And I'm sure there's a lot more you can do with that.
Yeah.
And there's a story of why it ended up being that degree in the first place, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. And so graduated with basically what had counted to a dual major in exercise science and nutrition, and then wanted to be a strength coach, and volunteered as a intern for 1 quarter is what the school was. They were in quarters. That was it. I never wanted to do it again. And it could have been the training program that was used. I don't want to say what type of program was used. I don't want to say the school. I don't want to say anything bad, about the coach, because it's a great coach and he's still around and produces results. It was just such a different philosophy than what I was used to, which at the time was just straight linear periodization and building absolute strength and maximal strength. So I decided not to do that, and I ended up being a fucking personal trainer, training people who haven't trained for 20 years. So,
Dave, literally same story. I did an internship at a Division I university and said, I don't know about this. Just a summer with a football team, and I was
obviously you need to have a minimum required skill set, which I do think the CSCS and having a degree, I think you learn the minimum skill set required. But if you're really going to be a coach, really any coach, I think you also need to have a certain mindset and a certain personality type. And I don't think I possess that. I can work with people in the gym without a problem who would place training as one of their top 4 priorities. That's kind of how EliteFTS, it's a big part of EliteFTS, is our target market are people who would put training as one of their top 4 priorities. If training falls under that, that's really not our target market. I don't want to say I don't give a fuck about those people, because I do, but you are the guys that are actually servicing those people. I want to service you guys, and then you can service those people. So in the long end, yes, we're covering that market, market, but they're not the target that we want to go after, because everybody goes after that. And the information is too, at that very beginner level, it's too diluted for me to even get passionate about anymore. So I ended up being a personal trainer, working in a corporate fitness center for close to 8 years, and worked up to coordinating the personal training program. And I think it went from, just in the first year, $4,000 in revenue a year, which was pathetic, which is one of the reasons why I took the job, is because
You say $4,000 a year?
No, we're going back now. We're going back into like 90, 91. So we're really kind of going back. And
Okay.
the issue was nobody was even selling. I mean, here's the thing. It was a corporate fitness center. So at the time, the average income of each member was around $200,000 to $250,000. So I saw that as an opportunity,
Right.
to be able, let me just get in here, no matter how it takes to get in here, and then negotiate and work my way into a position to where I can coordinate this, and work on getting a higher percentage of my own training. So everything was kind of scheduled out as soon as I finished doing the research on the club. In my mind, it wasn't a matter of if I was going to get the job or not. I was going to get the job, but was I going to get it with the opportunities that I saw inclined with it? Mm. And so the way I kind of structured that during the interview is they gave me an offer for, a salary or per hour or whatever it was, it was okay. And I turned it down for minimum wage with, if I do this with the program, this comes in return. And it was such an audacious goal to the manager that to him, it was a no-lose situation. And I structured it in such a way that they were still going to make money. They weren't going to lose money on me. But on me personally, at the top end, it was going to be really close to just breaking even on me. But if there were people underneath me, they were going to generate the revenue on that as well. So it took 6 months to a year to be able to get that full up and running, where I felt we could start bringing in other people, and then started bringing in other people for that, and did it for a long time. So, and while this is all going on, I'm working from an average opening the club at 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning till 9:30 p.m. And everyday clients are stacked. I mean, I had a waiting list. Everything was full. Ooh. I only left to train at Westside, which actually worked out to be a really cool thing, because the slowest time in the club was really between 9 and 11:30 or 12.
Yeah.
And so Louis was really adamant on starting training at 8:30. So I was really only giving up 2 half-hour blocks to be able to go train there, and then the rest of it was fine. What happened over a period of time is I couldn't, and group training was not, I tried to train people together and it just wasn't happening. I can't say universally this is how people and trainers were seen, but I was seen as a servant, like no different than the person that cleaned their house, or no different than, the guy that detailed their car once a week. And I was okay with that. As long as they were doing what they were supposed to do, they were making progress. I don't care how I'm labeled. They weren't going to label me any worse than I was labeled throughout my whole childhood. So
right.
I was fine with all that. But with that comes a certain degree of, I want to say entitlement, but it really isn't. It's more, they didn't want to share their person or their time with somebody else. They paid for that time, so that's their time.
Yeah.
So no matter how much I try to explain to them, you still have rest periods. Somebody else could do something. It didn't matter. It was their time. Now, things have changed to where I think everybody is doing some type of group thing now. Where back then the group thing was what happened in the aerobics room class.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So I got to a point where I couldn't bring in any more clients. I could keep increasing rates, but that only does so much for so long before it becomes, out of hand, you know. And I was dealing with never being home. So as I was speaking to a lot of and I had clients for a long time. So my attrition rate was very good. People didn't, they stayed. Some of them stayed, and I wish they didn't stay, but they stayed forever. So it was kind of hard to get rid of clients. And so I formed relationships with them. And after I had my first child, a couple of them pulled me aside, and we went to lunch actually. And they started asking me what I was going to do with my life, how I was going to raise a kid. How am I, you're never home, so how are you going to do this if you're never home? And so they saw something in me I didn't see in myself. And from that, we started putting together different ideas based upon what was most important to me. And that's where EliteFTS came from. It kind of came out of that. We troubleshoot a lot of different ideas. And the key thing that we are trying to figure out while we were going about this is every service and every product has a certain degree of seasonality associated with it. So the only way that you can really cover your seasonality, and that's a loss of sales during certain times of the year. Personal training picks up obviously after the first of the year, the summer it dips.
Oh yeah.
So the key to having any successful business is to have something else that's going to take that dip so what's high season during that low season? And so we are looking at all different types of business structures to be able to balance that, and internet retail is what came to the top after 20 different ideas. But the whole thing started a couple years before that, because I was answering questions on a site called deepsquatter.com. Jason Burnell had some Westside stuff on there, and my brother built a computer for me. I don't know, back then, I couldn't afford to buy one. And so the first thing you do is you go online, you got the dial. I don't know if you guys remember, it used to be dial-up, man.
Oh,
You'd sit there and,
we remember. We were on AOL.
Fucking, you'd wait 20 minutes for one porn picture to download. That sucked, So you download all the shit overnight so you could wake up in the morning, and it was a good time.
Can't wait to look at porn tomorrow.
Yeah, people have no idea what's going on, or how fortunate they are now to have things like Pornhub. Holy shit!
Porn.
And now I'm so old, I don't give a fuck. It's like, what is this? Right. And so he had a little section in there where he was talking about Westside training, and I don't want to say the stuff that was out there was wrong. It was just a little off. Yeah. So I sent him an email saying, look, some of these things are kind of on target. Some of them are not really what we're doing. So I started answering questions that he would post once a month. And that's when I realized just how bad my grammar really was. And that kind of led to seminars. And during this whole time while I was at Westside, I was also helping Louie. We had strength coaches in there every weekend. I just did a video series on misconceptions of Westside during the time I was there. We never trained in gear. We used gear in meets. So it's not like Westside is a system built for gear when we never fucking used it except for the meets. And then coaches were in there all the time. I can't think of a weekend that there weren't coaches in there. And this is over a 6-year stretch. It just was ridiculous. So I was learning from the coaches. I was getting fucked up myself. So I'm learning from physical therapists. I'm going to conferences for personal training because I don't know how to train my own clients. I know how to train people that have a general base, but this is people who haven't done anything for 20 years. They have heart problems. They have, all these different problems. And
very different. It's very different.
And all that shit I learned about METs through the ACSM certification wasn't helping me a fucking bit. And they tell me they just had heart surgery 3-4 weeks ago or whatever it is.
Right.
And so I'm learning from all these different disciplines and realizing that, you know, the personal trainers didn't like the strength coaches because strength coaches didn't know how to teach the lifts right. Strength coaches didn't like the personal trainers because they're all idiots. Physical therapists think everybody else is fucking everybody up. But meanwhile, I'm communicating with all of them and learning from them all.
Yeah.
And I'm applying all that knowledge to my clients, but I'm applying it to myself, passing some on to Louis. By no means am I saying I gave Louis, you know, any West Side ideas. I learned far more from him than any of the stupid shit that he would have ever learned from what I passed on. And while that was going on, I was going on the consulting trips with Louis. And then he got to the point where he just got burned out of doing them. So I started doing them for him. Seminars were the same way. You know, he kind of got burned out there. So I started doing those for him. So I'm kind of all over the place on the map during the last few years that I was working as a trainer, because I'm working with regular people on a daily basis, training with, you know, world record holders, you know, the best of the best in the sport. Probably, I'm biased, and I'm going to say it was during that time frame. There's never been a gym, and never will be a gym, that's been as strong as what Westside was ever. You know, this was before people were recruited in. I was the first one, I believe, to ever be asked to come and train at Westside that was from out of Columbus. So he created this monster fucking gym out of people just out of Columbus, which was kicking everybody's ass, you know, all over the world. And I don't think that'll ever be duplicated. It's now I know it won't be, because on, you know, the internet and online has spread so much that people train together as much.
Very different.
So the website started, to make a long story short, we're talking 20 years. You know, it's been for 20 years, and I was at Westside for 15 before that. So I'm covering 35 years almost of experience here. It started as a Q&A. We didn't even have a store. So it was just me answering questions, and then people started asking, you know, I'm recommending super training, science and practice of strength training, and bands, and you know, all these different things. And people were, where do I get them? And it's, you know, I had a little notepad on my computer that I just copy and paste like all the fucking time. That's where my clients kind of rung in and said, here's an opportunity that you may not be taken aware of. What if you supplied those things? You know, what if, and I'm like, well, I don't have the fucking money, you know, to buy the inventory. So I just bought 5 sleds, you know, and then those sleds sold, and I used that profit to buy more sleds. And just kept parlaying. That's why it took me so long to be able to pay myself. It took 6 years, 7 years before I could pay myself anything, because it was all going back in inventory, because I didn't have a loan. You know, I didn't have bad credit. I just did not want to borrow from anybody, because I'm paranoid. I'm an entrepreneur, you know, or a business owner. You're paranoid. You know, I didn't want to go out of business, because at a certain point in time, I knew I was going to have to make a decision and put all eggs in one basket. Right. And at that time, I had to be sure that this was going to at least generate revenue. You know, it took even longer. And in some years, I still don't make what I was making when I was training. So the grass is kind of always greener on the other side.
Right.
But the aim of the whole thing was to be able to put, you know, to target people who place training as a top 4 priority, and then to be able to put people in front of them at no cost that could help them formulate their own training philosophy. So not to be able to say, here's a program, go do this, it's the greatest thing in the world, but teach them how to think for themselves critically, and then to have the people there to be able to answer questions, and to have the articles to be able to help them formulate those. And that kind of keeps that target market high, because the lazy people want the simple answers and just the program to go do what they want to do. And that's fine. There's places for that, but that's not really our market, because in the grand scheme of things, most of our revenue is generated from strength equipment. So somebody who's thinking about training that's not serious about it is very unlikely to purchase $1,000 piece of strength equipment or set up a gym at some time.
Right.
or go to the gym owner and say, we need this. It's just not going to happen. So that's the synopsis. That's the.
Where did I had a quick question, just curiosity from the name. Where did you come up with the name EliteFTS?
The original name was Elite Fitness Systems, and before I started anything with it, my wife was trying to do in-home training.
Uh-huh.
So we already had the LLC. It was LLC at the time, I believe, set up for that. That didn't really work out, so I just adopted that because it was already set up.
Okay.
And over a period of time, the readers online shortened it to EliteFTS. And so I kind of took that as, well, that's kind of cool. The people who support us actually just made the name. It's now that we're realizing, well, for 10 years I've known it's kind of a shitty name, because you got to tell people, F is in Frank, T is in Tom, S is in Sam. So we're going to keep the name. We're in the process of doing a little rebranding to be able to help formulate the name a little bit better. Where we've tried to brand the EFS to go that way. Now we're going to try to go with the FTS instead of that, because it's, when you look at really what we do, it's focused, because of the top 4 priorities. And we're trusted. Now that we've been around for 20 years, very few companies can say that they're trusted. Like, you can't be in business for a year and say you're trusted.
No.
5 years for that matter.
No.
All right. And we're about strength. So we're going to start focusing on the back end of that, the FTS, focused, trusted, and strength. And that way, if somebody says, oh, EliteFTS, they're not going to say Frank Tom's, They'll say focused, trusted, and strength. And we're building that into our own narrative to be able to get that out and to rebrand it, because that also rebranded a little bit about who we are and what we do.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. That's a dope idea.
Yeah.
What one question I have is what you did with your training clients, like General Pop versus the West Side, because I feel like nowadays there's kind of a I'll tell you, the gym I work at in Ridgefield, all EliteFTS racks. We have a chest supported row. There's mini bands. It's a high-end gym. It's a little boutique gym in Ridgefield, which is a wealthy area. So we use all that stuff. So back then, what were you guys doing with your regular people that are like, hey, I sat at a desk for 30 years. Now I want to work out. Like, how do you get that person to?
I had to address each person. This is where it gets a little hard, because I had a lot of clients. So I had pretty much 80 active clients. So if I could get somebody to actually show up 4 times a week consistently, then I could do something that was more strength-based, kind of like what you're talking about.
Right.
But my goal simply was just to make them better. And so I struggled with this for a long time, because you can sit down and spend 2 hours writing a program for somebody that's only going to show up once a week. And then you're wasting your time, but you're also, it's not just wasting your time, it's wasting the time of the other clients that you're not coming up with a better plan for them. So what my compromise ended up being after the first couple of years, and the first year was tough, man. The one story I like to tell that it's funny because it's, I was raised in gyms where, now you go into a gym, most of the benches have just a bar in it. I was raised at the time where 135 just stayed on the bar. That's the warm-up. That's everywhere I went. That's what it was. So I remember the first client I had, man, I just threw a plate on each side and lifted it off. And I thought, as soon as I lifted it off, man, this is not going to go well. So I stayed real close to it and then pulling it off of the guy. And I didn't let it, I'm not an idiot. I didn't let it slam his chest and kill him or anything like that. I ended up doing a 135 bent over row is what I ended up. And then racked it and took it down, and he's all over the place with the bar. I mean, it's going left, right. I'm so fucking confused at this point. And how a human being can be this fucking weak, and I'm not gonna let him use a curl bar. There are certain things I just would refuse to do. because a couple reasons. It was a corporate health club, so a lot of times my client could have been in charge of 200 other employees, and some of those could be on the treadmill or bike looking right at him. So I'm not going to have him do something stupid that's going to make him look stupid in front of his, staff. Benching with a curl bar is fucking stupid in my opinion. A broomstick's even worse. So it was just a matter of guiding, holding the bar, guiding, using the Smith machine, using the, other machines, to be able to kind of regress, where we all like to think of progressions. That was kind of a regression. To answer your question, what I came up with because of frustration is I went push-ups. Some had it for the sit-ups. Some had it for a bench press as far as by body weight. There was one for sit and reach. There was one for squatting. There was another one for chin-ups, push-ups. There's maybe 15 or 20. There's probably 30. But out of the 30, a lot of them, like the sit and reach, were kind of pointless. So I took those and created a system of training based upon 4 classifications. And I named them after lions. Like the top level 4 was a lion. Underneath that was a tiger. Underneath that was a panther. Underneath that was a fucking kitten. So each one of these tests or lifts or exercises, because, walking on a treadmill for 3 minutes, that was a test. A 1 mile, that was a test. So I had cardio in there. I had flexibility in there. I had strength in there. I had everything in there ranked on these scales of 0 to 25%. That's the kitten, 26%. So for each level. And that became their card. And I got this from Westside in a way, because Westside we tracked key indicators called max effort movements. And then those max effort movements dictate what your squat, bench, and deadlift is going to be. Well, these became my key strategic indicators to be able to track what their fitness is going to be, which is going to be strength, endurance, health. The one at the bottom, which was body fat, was in a different color because I referred that out. I'm not licensed to do nutrition or diet programs. So, and I was smart enough to know I can't control what they do at home. I can only control what I can control.
Right.
So the body fat percentage was still on there. It was still tracked. I still did the tracking. That way I didn't have a dietitian or a registered dietitian pushing the calipers up extra hard the next time. And because what these idiots don't realize, if they keep cheating the spots, in 6 months, somebody else is going to take it. And then the client's going to go from 14% to 28, because they're really 28.
Right.
Everybody knows how to cheat the body fat calipers, no matter how good the calipers are. But to make a long story short on that one, that wasn't my responsibility. So when we went to review, when they moved to category, and they had to move 70% of the category to move into the next. So to move from a kitten to a panther or whatever it was, 70% of those indicators had to move. And then they were now labeled, panther, and I'd send a card home to their family and let them know, and kind of made a big deal about it.
Oh, cool.
Because it's just good customer service. It's good business. It's recognizing somebody that's never done anything at all for fitness. It's not like a participation award. They actually deserve credit, because they progressed. Most people that walk into a health club never progress. But the body fat, anytime that came up, and they're like, well, I don't know if you're doing your job because I'm not losing weight. I'm like, well, what did Joanne say about this? Oh, I haven't seen her yet. Well, she's she's the RD. I can't do a lot with this. I can increase your cardio, but that still isn't going to make up the deficit of the 10,000 extra calories you're putting away every night before bed. So it became a really cool way of structuring the training to where I could also fall back on and it balanced it out a little bit too, because they're not power lifters. So some of them wanted to just drive the bench press all the way to, the lion level and say they can a lion bench press. Well, that doesn't fucking work. You're not a lion unless you're 70% fucking lion. So it allowed me to back off on things that were moving too fast or they were really good at, to focus on the things that they really sucked at, which is essentially strength and conditioning to begin with, just at a regressed level. So it got to the point then that I really didn't even need to have, I didn't have to track their training at all. I just grabbed their card, and just by looking at their card and knowing how many times they come in per week, I can see what needs to be worked on, because it's so far under the rest of it that I hated doing cardio with people, and I hated doing any type of flexibility with people. I gave them stuff to do on their own, but if it suffered so bad behind everything else, then I had to do it. That was, my job is to move them to the right, as far as I possibly could. So if I did have somebody that was serious, which was fucking rare, and I was able to implement, some dynamic stuff, some of that other kind of stuff. But even with those people, if they couldn't hit that lion status on 70%, in my opinion, they didn't have the GPT or the level of preparedness to even do any type of training program like that to begin with. Right. So even if that was their desire, or they wanted to train like a bodybuilder or whatever it was, that's irrelevant until they can at least do these things.
Right.
And then I would move them forward.
Gotcha.
Word. Want more of the Strength Students podcast? Go check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and on Stitcher. Stitcher, I just met her.
All right, guys, welcome back. Second half Strength Students podcast here with Dave Tate. Little different today. Dave's gonna kind of, in a way, interview us. Steve and I are both trainers out of Connecticut. We both do little different things, but we are both trainers, certified, all that stuff. Went to school for it. So Dave wants to we're gonna go from like a mentor perspective of, he grew a business, a personal training business, and of course EliteFTS, but kind of giving us advice on what we should do to help our own business. So, Dave, take it away.
All right, so let's start. You clear off some space. You know that really cool conference table we have in the gym that everybody loves?
Yeah.
It's made of glass. And the reason it's made of glass is it becomes my desktop, my dry erase board. I'm meeting with people, I can take the notes on it. So that's the purpose. That's why it's here.
Oh, shit.
Everybody's like, I didn't know that. I just thought it was just a cool conference table. It's like, no, I work out here a lot, so it allows me to put my thoughts down, or if somebody's training and I'm watching them, I can go make a note. They need a weak upper back, so I don't have to interrupt the training to explain what I need to build into their program later. So with this in mind, how long has it been since you guys have been out of school?
6 years for me.
6 years. And what's the background from a personal training standpoint? And let's define personal training for your listeners right now as being physical, working people one-to-one, not online. This is
right. Yes, I've done. Yeah, I believe we both of us have not done. We haven't even done. It's all been in person.
It's all been in person. Now, what's your experience doing that? How long?
Since I got out of college, 6 years. Went right into I actually worked at a senior center. So that was in the mornings. Then at night I would go to high school and then do other stuff at night with teams. There's a lot of team high school sports stuff, but also senior citizens. But now it's more one-on-one with general population.
And then mine, I've been 2 years now. Started with, did a little stint with a college team, and then from there it was just one-on-one personal clients.
Where are you working with these clients at, these one-on-one clients now?
I work at it's literally called The Gym in Ridgefield, and so it's a corporate facility, and that's where that's where I spend the majority of my training there.
How many members would you say that they have total overall, if you were to guess?
1,200.
Okay. As you know, and I'm gonna skip a lot here. I'm gonna assume that your skills as a trainer are good, that you don't suck as a trainer.
Thank you.
Hold on a second. You can train whatever you want to train. So we don't have to go there, because if you have a shitty product, it doesn't matter what you do.
Right.
You got a shitty product. So we're going to make the assumption here that you're getting progress from the people that you're working with. Looking back through your history here, the one thing you have to remember being a personal trainer is your number one source of business is referrals. Okay. I'm not really sure how many referrals you're going to get out of a senior center, if you're working there.
That was in the beginning. I'm not there anymore.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I'm looking at your history.
Gotcha. Okay.
What your business skill set is.
All
so
right.
that didn't help you develop any skill set as far as building referrals at all, because you're just working in probably a group setting with the seniors, and there's definitely a place for that and people that need to do that, because they need that in a big way. And then when you get to the high school setting, the same thing kind of happens. Not only that, but your training starts to get compromised a little bit because you're at the mercy of the coach. So you're either working with you're doing what the coach wants you to do, or you're fighting against the coach.
Absolutely.
You're not going to get referrals from kids that are from other schools.
Right.
So there's your referral history is not really good there. When you work in the college sector, it's the same thing. Your athletes or clients, it's all the same thing. They're spoon fed to you. You go on the floor and there they are. And this has been the case with both of you for 6 years, as you've been spoon fed the people that you've been training. And now you're in a place to where there's no spoon feeding. There might be, like, somebody may come to the desk and say, look, I'm interested in hiring a trainer, but that's becoming more and more unlikely that that's going to happen. It rarely happened 20 some years ago when I was doing it.
Right. The last 3 years has definitely been learning, without a doubt, like sales, like approaching people on the floor, and
yes,
very different last 3 years.
Personal training is sales, and hell, online training is still sales, but it's referral sales. Now, the cool thing about actual one-to-one training, like you're talking about, is when you train somebody online, the only communication that you have with them is written. Maybe they send you a video of the last 2 reps of the set, which really doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot, but it's better than nothing.
Right.
I assume you both still at least have 1 or 2 clients now, right?
Yeah, at least one.
Okay, I just checking, just making sure. Now, when they walk in the door, by the time they see you, how much time elapses, or how many steps do they have to take? Is it 10 yards, 5 yards, 2 yards? How much time? Is it a minute, 2 minutes?
Less than a minute. Gym's small. They'll see me. I'm usually out there waiting with a clipboard, most likely.
Okay, so they come in, so you got less than a minute, and you see them. So either they're going to go change. Do they go change, or they go straight to you?
Some depends. Some people go to a locker, and some people,
Okay, so you're going to see them walk in. They're going to go change, then you're going to see them come out. Okay, now do you have them walk on a treadmill or do anything real simple cardio based before they start working with you, or do you just start right in?
Usually do, depending on especially what they need, usually do dynamic warm up, maybe some foam rolling if they're feeling a certain way. I just ask them how they are and what they've done outside.
They're doing this on their own. You're just kind of looking and watching.
No, I instruct. Some people know. Some people are they're like, yeah, and like dynamic warm up, let's go through this, and they know, and others need to be constantly reminded.
Okay. So I'm gonna make this a general assumption here of 2 to 5 minutes. Now, Steve, would you say that's the same in your case?
Yeah, they'll come in. I'll usually take 5 minutes. I'll do some sort of heart rate, raising the heart rate, and then some sort of priming mobility.
No, I'm talking before you start working with them, how your eyes are on them in some way or another for 2 to 3 minutes before you even start to talk to them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now here's a question for you guys. You have your clipboard and you're waiting for them, and then they walk in. By the time they actually get to you to train, how many things on that clipboard have you just adjusted?
Sometimes it's a lot. Sometimes it's, I'll always have a plan, but if we have to adjust, it's not a problem.
Okay, so here's my takeaway with this. I don't want to get too lengthy with it.
Right.
You haven't said a word to them yet. You haven't seen them move yet. They haven't said a word to you yet, but you've already made significant changes on their program for the day, which that's why nonverbal communication is 70 or something % of all communication. That's where the issue kind of falls with online training, because they don't have that. All right. So this nonverbal communication. Now, if I was to continue down this path and say, how many changes do you make throughout the whole training session? Like if we took that first program that you wrote and then rewrote it after the session was over with everything that you had to change, how much? It's probably 70, 60, 70% completely different. If you have weights actually structured in there, there's a good chance it's 100% different.
Yeah.
Just based upon what it is.
Yeah.
So that,
you don't know, like clients, like I'll see clients' travel schedules and guys that travel for business, and they're like, yeah, I just flew back from Ireland. And they walk in and they look like just hell. And like, they're in a different time zone. So I know exactly what you're saying. You have to adjust a lot,
That's where one-to-one training is never going to go away. And that's where one-to-one training should always trump and beat any type of online training possible. Because when such a huge percentage of communication is nonverbal, and when you're online, all you have is basically email and video. So email is probably the worst form of communication ever created, because it can be misconstrued, a number of different ways.
Yeah.
And then the video is just maybe one exercise for a couple reps. And there's no intuition, there's no initial feedback on what they look like on a good day, what they look like on a bad day, just when they walk in the door.
Right.
So that's kind of profession protection, and the better that you can get at reading those things, the better you're going to get as a trainer. But most people who have been training, now people who are completely self-absorbed and unaware, you can tell them. You may have them in your gym, and you can tell them, and their clients suck. They don't ever get better because they're not able to make these adjustments like what we're talking about. Now, from that standpoint, the reason why you're not able to grow the clientele is your referral. Well, let me just ask you this. What referral system do you use?
So what system? So it would just be based off of client's word of mouth. Is that what you would?
Yeah, but how do you quantify that? How do you implement it? How do you execute it?
At my gym, there's usually my client, for example, say they want their daughter, whatever, son to train with me. They'll go. There's a woman who handles everyone's schedules, which is kind of new to me, but it's okay. And they'll kind of approach, like if you train with them, like, hey, I want my son to come in. Are you available these days? And I'm like, yeah, go talk to. Her name's Kate. Go talk to Kate. Put them in my book, and that's kind of how. If a referral, that's kind of how it works, pretty much. Or we had a trainer just leave, and he'll suggest who we want. He's moved away, so he gave his clients to people who he thought was good, and he set them up with like a comp, and you kind of sell them within that session of like they decide if they like you or not, and you sell them based off that, and then that would be a kind of referral based like that.
Not really sure that would be a referral system. I think that would be more of a sales closing system.
Okay.
Or a management scheduling system. So what I'm asking is
referral system, like, hey, talk to so-and-so client that you have. Hey, I have some space that opened up. If you know anyone or have anyone who wants to come train, tell them to come down. And if they sign up, like, you'll get like a week free or a session free or something. You mean like that or something different?
Yeah. Like how do you address the conversation with your clients?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
What's up?
Dave's gonna spank us, I hope.
It's like, is this over yet or what?
No, I'm looking at the guy behind me like, are you listening to this shit? Well, let me just put it to you this way. You guys are going to, 4 or 5 months from now, you're going to have more clients and you know what to deal with. How many other trainers work in the gym?
For me, 8, yeah.
All right. Is there anybody who's full? Who's just
my boss is packed to the gills. He's been there 12 years.
All right. So he's the only one?
As of now, I'm not packed. There's days where I'm packed to the gills, but it's not every day like him.
Yeah.
I would say I would probably, out of the 8 or 9 trainers there, I would say I'm in the top 2, top 3 on a daily basis as far as schedule booked wise.
All right. Steve, what's the case with you?
A little different. I just left the gym that I was at, and I'm training on my own, pretty much just out of the CrossFit gym that I train at. So I'm just kind of doing my own thing.
Okay. We have 2 different type of gyms going on here. One of them seems more commercial. One of them seems more of a box. Mm-hmm. In both of your cases, is everybody working with a trainer when you're in there?
No.
Not in mine.
There's people that are free training, right? They're just working out on their own.
In my situation, it's a CrossFit gym, so it's classes. Mainly, everyone's there to take classes, but the coaches have, they have their personal clients as well. Okay.
You can't sell who you don't know. Okay, so you have to know the people before you can sell them. So knowing them, and then they have to trust you. And then once they become a client and they build that trust, they're going to become loyal. And then when they become loyal, there's something that's called a lifetime value. How that client isn't just $100 a month or whatever somebody's charging. That client's lifetime value is based upon how long somebody will typically stay a client with you. So if they're going to stay a client with you for 3 years, compound that out. And these are numbers that you should be thinking about every time you sit down to do your own analytics, of the financial aspect of what you do. Because the first mistake people make is they don't look at the lifetime value of the customer. They're just looking at the acquisition, of the customer and what it's going to bring in. So if you have a lifetime value of $3,000 for your average customer, you could realistically run a referral program that you would give away $300 free to anybody who signed up. But you better know your numbers, because that can put you in the hole really deep if your average lifetime value is 1 month. You see what I'm saying? So when you're looking at referral programs, as you were discussing, to where you would give certain months free and stuff like that, that has to fall back on what your numbers actually are, and then what's attractive and what's not attractive. Typically for referral programs, a happy client really doesn't give a shit about free students. They're going to come anyhow. They don't care. They'll give you the referral because they want to see you do better. All right. Your way of extracting referral is the problem. So there's 2 areas to dive into, which is going to be the referrals and then the new clients, because you both have the ability to pull new clients and don't even have to walk out the door. They're there. They're right in front of you the whole time.
Right.
So for the new clients, I always refer, just an old school notebook or a Moleskine book, something that you have to write with, not your fucking phone. Something that you have somewhere. Say there's a back trainer office or something like that, where you can go take some notes, so you're not on the floor taking notes. Anytime you're on the phone taking notes, or anytime you're on the floor taking notes that are not working with the client, or anytime you're on the floor on your phone. And that's bad. That looks bad, to any prospect. So if there's a place where you can go take notes, you want to take notes. Essentially what you want to do is you want to show up early for your sessions because you're probably not paid for the time that you're not training people. So you want to show up early for your sessions, and each day introduce yourself to a couple people. If you've been there for 3 or 4 years, that still doesn't matter. A lot of people are like, oh man, I'm going to feel like a douchebag because I've seen this person over and over for 3 years and now I'm going to go introduce myself. So what? You just have an opening line, make a joke with them.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I just realized we've been seeing each other for 3 years now. Man, I don't even know your name. I'm sorry. My name's Nick. And then, hey, great. Nice to meet you, Nick. My name's Dave. That's fucking all you need to do. Then you go in the back, you fucking open your notebook, and you got a page for Dave, right? And then you write down what you remember about him characteristic-wise. I was fortunate in a club that we did the laundry, so I could write down their clothes because they wore the same shit every time, all right? But usually shoes, people will wear the same shoes. So you can write down his name, you can write down the shoes, you can write down maybe the guy always trains in a headband or a hat. Any defining characteristic you can write down that's going to help you remember who he is, that's what you want to put. And then you do that for every person, a couple a day. I mean, you don't want to be the creeper guy, talking to everybody every day. But a couple people a day is reasonable. You're talking to a couple people while you're waiting on your client. Your client comes in, you train them, and then maybe one more before you go.
Right.
But within a 4-month period of time, you should at least have, out of a 1,200 gym operation, there's at least 200 people that are coming in regular. There should be. You should have at least 50 people that you have pages on. Now, the next time Dave walks in, you say you don't remember his name. That's cool. That's what you got the book for. You go in the back, you open your backpack, you open it up, and it's like, oh, fuck, that's Dave. Then when you walk by, it's like, how you doing today, Dave? And you used his name. So the most pleasant sounding word to any human being is their own name.
Yeah.
Then he might not know your name. All right. He might forget. And you're like, then you can say something like, oh, remember, I'm Nick. We met the other day for the first time after 3 years.
Yeah.
You got to find ways to build rapport.
Right.
So you can build that conversation. Because every time you see him, and you're not interrupting his workout. I mean, he's got to be, not in the middle of a WOD or some shit like that. Would just be stupid. I mean, you got to use your head.
Yeah.
For me, it was great because the place was just lined with treadmills. So people riding bikes, walking on treadmills, it's just prime. You just make your way down the line, hopefully not fuck anybody's name up by the time you go to write them all down. And then write them down. But if you keep doing this over a period of time, this conversation goes into, hey, Dave, how was Billy's soccer game last weekend? Did he actually get a chance to play goalie? Because people tell you things. This. They're doing it now. Right. But you're not documenting it. And when you can use that back to help build rapport, now he's thinking, holy crap, Nick remembered my kid's name and then he had a soccer game and then he wants to be a goalie. This is building rapport. It's sales.
Yeah.
This is basically sales. And at the same time, it's building rapport. So now when you're walking in the gym, it's like, you ever watch the show Cheers?
No.
Yeah. It's like when you walk in the gym, everybody's like, Nick, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so why do you think the owner of the place has the most clients?
Yeah.
It's not because he owns the place, it's because he's got better rapport with everybody than everybody else does.
True.
So now what happens is there's going to come a point to where you'll go in maybe an hour early. And then hopefully he's there. And then you say, hey, look, I have some free time open. Is there anything that you would like to work on that I can help you with? Totally on me, just comped out. And it should not be any big deal. If hardly anybody's going to say no, because everybody's got some fucking issue. And then you take them through a general session because you don't have a health history on the dude. So a very safe general session just to kind of teach him a couple things that you already know are fucked up because you've been taking notes on it.
Right.
Like the guy's bench is horrible, you know, and hopefully he says he wants to work on his bench. But if not, you can direct it that way. You know, he says he wants to work on his triceps. You can say, you know what, the bench press is a great movement for your triceps. And then you show him how to do it properly. At that time, you can ask him, has he ever considered working with somebody, you know, for better technique and so forth? I would say 90% of the time you're going to close. If you've built the trust, you're going to close.
Yeah.
90% of the time. If you go straight in and say, hey, are you looking for a trainer? 90% of the time, you're not going to close.
Right.
So that's from a sales standpoint. It's people like to talk about sales funnels and Salesforce and all these different programs that you can use and InBody and MindBody or whatever all this other shit is. Nothing works better than speaking to people and writing stuff down, because when you write it down, you're going to remember it. You can put it in any software that you want, and as soon as you log something in the software, it's forgotten. You write it down on paper, you're going to remember it.
Right.
And that will increase your clientele tremendously. Now, that takes care of the new clients. And you're fortunate, you're very fortunate, because you don't have to leave the gym. Where it's really, really fucking hard is when you work in a personal training center or a sport training center that's a destination for training, because they don't have people there who aren't there that's already committed to hire. So now you got to do outside sales.
Right.
That's a whole nother animal.
Right.
That's not worth discussing because you don't need it. You can pack your schedule within 3 months just off this. Now, I'll let you guys absorb that for a minute before I get into the recording. Well, I guess you can always go back and listen to it again. Referrals. The worst thing you can do is while you're training with somebody, say, hey, man, you know anybody else interested in training? That's fucked up. You know, I can ask you guys, hey, man, you know anybody that's interested in the power rack? And you're like, yeah, I kind of do, but fuck you. Because once again, you don't have that trust. It's awkward, man. It's like if people ask you straight up for a sale right out of the gate, most of the time people are offended. It's because it's like, I thought I was here to train, or they don't know what to say. So you have to take advantage of their storytelling, because when they come in to train with you, they're telling you what they did last weekend. The 4th of July is just over. So you're going to go into the gym today, and if it's a client that you haven't seen from the 4th, tell me I'm wrong. They're going to tell you what the fuck they did over the 4th of July.
Dude, I know. Correct? I feel like I know everything. Like, I'm more like, you're a therapist. Like, that's why I thought it was so interesting. You had the sociology degree, because Steve and I have always talked about, like, the science stuff is cool. You need to know your training info, but you're dealing with people. Like, you need to know how to deal with people every day, And
that's part of the training. And that would be part of being, a psychologist, is knowing the people. Right. You need to think of a sociologist. You need to know the people that know the people.
Right.
People. Okay. So your client comes in today and they start talking to you about what they did over the 4th of July. Now you're in a position there where you can expand on that a little bit. Like, were the fireworks better there, this year than last year? Did you, how well did you stick to your diet? Normal shit that you would normally talk about. Then you can say, by the way, was there anybody else there that that might be interested in training? Now what you did is you just put faces to the question. When you ask people, do you know of anybody who's interested in training? There's no faces to the question. When you ask them, and you want to quantify it by saying, were you there with a group, that kind of stuff. But when you put faces to the questions, birds of a feather flock together, right?
Right. Yeah.
So when you say, is there anybody who was there with you that might be interested in training, immediately they're thinking of 4 or 5 people. And usually, in a high percentage of the time, they're going to say, yeah, actually, Stephanie might be. Now, here's where it gets tricky. That's where you say, do you mind calling Stephanie for me to offer a free session? And they're going to say, not at all. And just leave it there. Leave it there. All right? When they come back in next, by the way, they're not going to call. All right? Very low percentage that they're going to call.
Yeah, right.
5-10% they're not going to call. Who wants to call their friend and say, hey, look, my trainer just offered you a free personal training? It's just not. It's not.
Hey, I noticed at the 4th of July picnic you were eating a lot of shit and you look pretty terrible.
Yeah.
How about you in the gym?
Exactly. But what's going to happen is when this client comes in next time, you're going to say, oh, by the way, did you get a chance to give Stephanie a call? No, I haven't had the time. Then your reply is, well, do you mind if I call her for you? All right, you can't say that the first time because you're a creeper guy. You say that the second time, now you took the stress off them, and now you're doing them a favor. Do you mind if I call them for you and use your name as a reference? Of course, that would be great. And then then you get the number at the end of the sentence or end of the session. And then when you call Stephanie, it's hey Stephanie, this is Steve from whatever gym. I'm Melissa's personal trainer. She wanted me to give you a call because she thinks you might be interested in coming in for a session to kind of get you acclimated to some exercises you may not be used to doing, or whatever you want to say that fits how you train. She's not going to say no because her good friend just gave her a gift, which is a free session.
Right.
She comes in, and there you go. Now you have them in the door as this is called a referral system. This is one type of referral you can use. So in all these referrals systems that you have, you should have more than one. I'm just giving one. You can have another one where you're, having raffles for clients and all this kind of stuff. You should be tracking all this to see what the return is on the investment, what's working, what's not working. But this is a no-brainer because anytime people are talking to you, and sometimes they'll even tell you, hey, I had dinner last night. How do they say that? Were your ears burning last night? Well, we were talking about you at dinner last night. If that's not like the biggest fucking clue in the world that there's a prospect there, you have to jump on that. But always go with, and I found this the hard way, ask them to call first. They're not going to do it, and then take it off of their plate. Then they see it as a favor. And then if they do sign up, if you do want to compensate them, you can compensate them. But usually what goes further than anything else is just a simple handwritten thank you card. Thank you for the referral, and mail it to them. And then it builds up. Now, when you're dealing with the sales process, when they walk in the door, you can't just throw somebody on the floor and train them. There still has to be a health history of some sort.
Absolutely.
I don't think there has to be extensive fitness testing, body fat testing. Some people, I think, go way overboard. But if you can take the health history that you use now, and I'm sure you both do, change the questions up a little bit, ask some other questions in between there, because there's only 4 reasons why anybody is going to say they don't want to train. One is going to be time. The second is going to be commitment. The third is going to be spouse or significant other. Yeah. And the fourth is going to be money. All right? There's only one that matters, and it's money. The other 3 can always be overcome in a sales process with objections. And if you go to sales training, they're going to teach you how to overcome all these objections. All that sales training stuff did was piss me off, because sitting there having a conversation with somebody holding the pen in their face to sign a contract, and the first person that talked loses, that's bullshit. What I did was I implemented in questions either during a gym tour or during a health history to say, are you training now? How committed are you? Basically, I'm asking them up front, how committed you are to achieving, the mud run or whatever their fitness goal is. It's your job to help extract whatever that goal is. But then asking them, how committed are you to this? So you're going to address that. Significant others become a little bit of a confusing conversation anymore, but they're still going to try to pass the blame or the decision onto somebody else. So you can ask them, are you married? I look for a ring, whatever it is.
Right.
And, I would just say, what did your husband or what did your wife say? But that was 25 years ago. Now maybe, what does your significant other feel about your training? Oh, they think it's great. Okay. And then time, when they come in, is this usually a good time for you to train? Would this be the time you normally would train? Do you have the flexibility in your schedule to be able to train? Because whatever I teach you, because you're going to teach them regardless of if you make a sale or not, you're still going to teach them something while they're there.
Right.
So whatever you teach them has to be transferable to whatever time they have to allocate towards that. So before you even get into asking for any type of sale or any type of sign up, you've already spoken about time, spouse, and commitment. So when you do sit down and say, hey, are you ready to get started next week? Which always should be a definitive statement. It shouldn't be a question. Do you want to start next week? To me, you're just asking for a no. What day works best to start next week?
Right.
Then they're either going to tell you a day or they're going to backtrack. And if they backtrack, then they're going to give you an excuse. This is where you want to be silent. What day works best for you next week, Tuesday or Thursday? Always give them two options, whenever you're given any type of sales type of question. And then just wait for them to answer. Because if you do talk first, you're fucked. And then you got to backtrack. They're either going to say, well, none of those work, or I have to check with my spouse. I don't have the time, or whatever it is. If you did your job overcoming these objections beforehand, you can just, with the rapport that you build with them, just joke and say, come on, man, you just told me 5 minutes ago you had the time.
Right.
Is it really the time or is it something else?
Yeah.
You want them to say it's the money. You really do. Because especially when they're approached with it. Actually, I would hit them up with the money before you ask them. You can't just say, do you want to start next week, because they don't even know how much it is. Just say, hey, for your information, these are the different packages that we offer. And then you make sure that the highest price package is the one that stands out, right? Because you want to be able to negotiate.
Right.
And if the lowest one is what you put out there, you don't want to negotiate something that isn't going to work for either person. But if you can get them to say, yeah, $400 or $500 a month is a little bit too steep for me right now, that's when you can say, well, what about the bronze package? That's, once a week for $100 a month. That works. Then you get them there, then you just try to work them up.
Right.
All right. So that's a process. So you have to establish a sale. You know how you have a training process?
Right.
You establish a referral process. You need to establish a sales process. And then when you have those, and they all need to fit to your own values, your own structure, how you are, it can't make you feel uncomfortable or it's going to show. You have to be totally comfortable with it. And right now you have no processes. All right. Which is why there's no clients.
Right.
Everything think about if you train somebody with no process. They just walked in and all you did is say, you just did whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, lap machine's open. I guess we'll do that. And if you have no process, you have no result. So you have to have a process to be able to have a result. Then you have to have a way, as you do in training, to quantify if that process is actually working or not. You know, and so just basic spreadsheets. You don't have to go to, you know, business school to be able to figure this out. But
right.
And this is a more solid process than most trainers are using, that are using what I call gimmick type processes, which those actually work for you because you will get those clients, because they won't stay with the person that they're working with because they're not going to get results, and they're over promising and under delivering.
Yeah, so what would be gimmick type stuff? Like, give us an example of that. Like, you'll lose 20 pounds in a month, like something like that.
Oh, just like skinny jeans boot camp. You know, you know, things like that in somebody's mind starts to create an opportunity for this to not happen. You know, 6 weeks fat loss challenge. That's going to get a lot of people. It might get a lot of people in the door. It might get a lot of people to sign up for a class. But one of the first things I talked about was the lifetime value of a client. If you get somebody to sign up for a skinny jeans boot camp, which is $150, they do the boot camp and they never come back again, versus getting somebody that's going to sign up and actually become a long-term client that's going to last for 2 years, that's going to generate $3,000 of lifetime income, you know, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
You know, the club is the one that's going to come up with these classes and boot camps and all that, because they have to generate revenue to keep the doors open, which is, I call it swinging door revenue, where they may not be doing the commercial gym thing and just selling memberships and hoping people don't show up. They are selling whatever they can sell to keep people moving through the door and to keep the revenue high. As trainers, you don't have to have a spinning door sales concept, because you don't want that, because that means you suck as a trainer. Because you know, unless you're just a consultant. You know, if you're a consultant, then yeah, you're going to see somebody once a month, once every 2 months, whatever it is, and then you're going to need a large number of clients to be able to do that.
Right. Yeah, man, that was a lot. I think that's definitely something. I know Steve and I worked at a facility together a couple years back that was very corporate, and you're talking about a lot of things, that some stuff we had to do there. I remember like pushing supplements on people, which turned people off, obviously. We had like a minimum per month, and but now where we're at is I don't want to say laid back, but it's just different. But definitely, I really appreciate your advice on that, because the sales process is probably the hardest thing for trainers, because you get so engrossed in the science and the programming, but it's like, you know, I'm still becoming comfortable with the sales process. Like, I have a good rapport with people at the gym. I talk to everyone. I know their kids. But as far as like taking that next step and being like, hey, do you want to do a session with me? Sometimes I'm like, I feel too, I guess.
Change your verbiage. You know, if you're saying, do you want to do a session with me, and that's creating stress, change that verbiage. Change it to, is there anything I can help you work on? You know, change it to something like that subconsciously and consciously to you is not as threatening. That, like I said, all this still has to fit your own core values. If it doesn't fit your own core values, then you're going to feel like you're going to feel way uncomfortable. You still are going to be out of your comfort zone to a certain extent, but sometimes it's just changing the question and changing the narrative that makes all the difference in the world.
Right.
Because now it's not a session that's going to lead to you trying to sell them. It's a session that you've seen their bench is wrecking the shit out of their shoulders, and now you have the opportunity to actually kind of help them with that. And even if they don't sign up, you still help them with that. And keep in mind, if they don't sign up and somebody's bench looks bad and they're trying to show them or whatever, they're going to refer you. So you want to make sure that people that don't sign up with you, that you've given free sessions or, you know, free help to, become your referral sources. They start sending people to you because of what you did for them.
Right.
You did them a huge one-up by taking an hour of your time to help them become better. Most people don't take that for granted and won't forget it.
Gotcha. Yeah. And Steve, you have any questions for Dave at all?
The one question I was thinking was, does anything change if you're like a kind of like an independent trainer? You're not really in a corporate gym anymore. You don't really have people getting funneled to you. It's not people lined up on the treadmills, things like that. Like, does anything change? Like, is there any sort of
finding referrals, finding those first leads, the people to put in the book? It's really hard, but it can still be done. It could be a waitress. You got to build rapport. I mean, you're a trainer, and people need to know that you're a trainer or a strength coach or whatever you want to do that. So wherever you go, you need to be able to, and I suck at doing this outside of the gym setting because I'm just not comfortable there. But if I was stuck in a position to do that, every waitress every restaurant I would go to would know that I'm a trainer. Because if they overhear somebody was looking for somebody, there's a potential referral source. All the people around you, need to know what you do for a living and that kind of stuff. And it has to happen at a grassroots level. You can do all you want to do on Instagram and Facebook and all this stuff. That doesn't fucking do anything for putting people through your door. Mm-hmm. That's the key. A key thing here where a lot of people are really fucking up is there's putting so much time and effort into a social media presence for a brick and mortar operation, where if they took that same amount of time and put it into actually, meeting new people that could generate the referrals, it's simple things like, Toastmasters, I don't believe is expensive, and that will teach somebody how to speak and how to present. That's not a bad thing. That's a group of other professionals that you can get around. The Chamber of Commerce always has meetings as well. There's always these meetings that you can go to where you can actually learn things that doesn't cost much, if anything, but puts you in front of other professionals. Now, if you're in front of other professionals and you're in there, you're not dressed like a complete meathead, but you're also not dressed like an executive either.
Right.
So you just dress like you're going to dinner. All right. And you're around other professionals, what are they going to think of you if you're there? Are they going to think that you're the meathead, or are they going to think that you actually take your profession professionally? And so those are the people that you're going to write in the books. Maybe they'll be there next time. So it's the same concept. It's just going to be in places that you will find people that would be looking for the type of services that you offer. You don't want to go to, a soup kitchen, to find clients that can't afford the service. And you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's other reasons to go there, which I think are extremely important. You're not going to go there to find, clients at all. So that's how you go about doing that. And being in a box, it creates a different structure because a lot of people, boom, boom, you don't have that much time.
Yeah.
But you always have time to introduce yourself.
Okay.
And it just takes longer when it's a fast turning time period to be able to do that. But that doesn't matter because you still have the referral end that you're really not even working in any way whatsoever. Okay. So to me, the greatest return I had was always referrals. That's pretty much was the whole business. I had to do the book thing to build the clients because I didn't know anybody. I was a 308-pound fucking powerlifter with a goatee, walking around a corporate fitness center. I had every strike against me. The only thing I had going for me is I demanded attention. So people would at least look at me. So if I came over and, I either scared the shit out of them.
Yeah.
It was up to me to break that barrier, from that. But once my schedule started to get full, say 30 billable hours per week, I didn't have to do that anymore. I still did out of habit, just talk to people, but I wasn't writing it down anymore because my referrals were more than what I could handle. When I started having to train trainers underneath me, I had to teach them how to do this because when I tried to do it for them, it didn't work. Everybody wanted to work for me, or have me train them.
Yeah.
Because I was doing the footwork, they had to learn how to do it. And some people it came natural, some people you had to force it on them until it came natural. But either way, the sales aren't. If you're just waiting for drop-ins, and having the manager of the club pick you above 5 other people, you're never going to build a client base ever. No matter how good a rapport you make with the gym owner, you're still going to at some point in time piss them off. And then as soon as you start training more clients than he or she, now you got a whole nother dynamic, which is a problem.
Yeah.
Even though they're making money on you, now you're the most popular guy there. Sometimes that creates an issue as well. But usually if you can get to that point where you're the most popular person there and you have a waiting list, that's when you can start looking at how much are you actually paying them compared to how much would it actually cost you to open your own place if your referral system is strong. Okay. Because at that point, your referral system is also bringing them in a shit ton of members because they still got to have a membership to work with somebody as a trainer, I believe, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's down the road. But that's typically how that whole process works is they'll get to that top level and then start thinking about having their own place. But that's a whole nother discussion there, which would be another 2-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Having your own place doesn't mean that you're going to be a trainer. It means you're going to be a business owner.
Exactly.
And so that takes a lot of thought. Sometimes it's worth dealing with the bullshit to do what you love to do the majority of the time.
Sweet. Okay.
Anything else, Steve? You got any other questions for Dave?
No, that was my only question I had. But later on, I'm gonna have a million.
Yeah,
so
that's fine. That worked.
Dave, thank you so much. This was awesome, especially just giving us advice. We deeply appreciate that, and hopefully one day get to meet you in person. That'd be
great.
Yeah, dude, we'd love to come down to EliteFTS, man. Check it out.
That'd be cool.
Be out there for What was that?
I said, send me an email. Let me know. We can work something out.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely. That would be amazing. All right. I need to stop fanboying out. All right, guys. That's it for the Strength Students podcast with Dave. Dave, thank you. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Go to iTunes, give us a 5-star review. And whatever you do on Stitcher, which we still haven't figured out, but we will. And go subscribe to our YouTube channel. All right, guys. Thanks.
All right. Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.